All right, well, so here we are. We're back. Everyone,
As promised.
everyone now waiting to hear the Dominican Republic story. This one actually connects a little bit to some of the videos we've reacted to in the past, because we've had videos in the past from people that are non-cave certified who've been into caves and have either died or have been, lost inside the cave. Just crazy stories, right? Barely made it out alive. This one was something like that, right? It was two divers from Italy or something that kind of travel around the world doing this kind of thing.
Right.
You told me something about it. You want to remind everyone what?
So, all I knew originally was, I think it was Ken Hill from the head of the IUCRR that reached out to all of its members that do side mount diving, because these two divers had come up missing and are reported overdue. And they found one of them, and it was really small, tight, nasty, and who would be willing to go if they need us. So obviously I volunteered right away. I found out later that the guy that was actually the first victim that I recovered had been talking that he had a reputation for going around the world or to different countries, different cave systems, and doing cave dives. And apparently an instructor had told him over in Italy, you obviously enjoy this, get the training. And apparently, now this is just what I was told, that he said, there's nothing you can teach me that I don't already know. Mm-hmm. So he was and that's the whole complacency thing.
Yeah.
If somebody does something, even if it's dangerous or not right, and they get away with it, and they do it again, they get away with it, and you tell them it's dangerous. I've done this many times. Nothing to worry about here. And this is the prime. If you remember back on the NSS CDS conference talk that I did in, I want to think it was around 7 or 8. It was on complacency, and this hits right on that. But anyway, so we made the request, that I was available as a volunteer if they needed me. The DRSS, which is their version of the NSS, over there has a lot of fantastic divers. They're very capable. I didn't want to step on any toes, so I just said, I'm available if you need me. They had many experts going in there, and all I was told was he was stuck, and they found the first victim, but they couldn't find the second victim. So they assumed he was further in the same passage, but they couldn't get around the first victim to identify whether he was or wasn't in there. They were just focused on that victim. So dive after dive after dive after dive. Now, when they started in this tunnel, and they'd searched a lot apparently before getting to this tunnel, they saw zero visibility or near zero visibility water. And they're going along, there's a T, and then the line's just gone. It's broken. There's no line. So they tied on and ran their own reel. So they worked, and apparently multiple different people tried this, trying different things. I don't know, I wasn't brought into the loop really. Patrick Widman was the last one that they brought over from Mexico. And apparently he was calling Lamar, because Lamar 4 or 5 years before had taught him his IUCRR class, so he was calling Lamar for advice. And anyway, it was
All right.
sorry about that. They were still on.
Camera's rolling.
Okay. So little power outage. So anyway, apparently I was told that it was said that, when it's impossible, we call Ed, because he had called Lamar like 4 nights in a row. This didn't work. What can I try? And Lamar's very much like me. I go in, see what I see, make decisions based on that. So that's when I was called, and he told me, I know you have a reputation for doing this by yourself, but you really need somebody. So that's when I thought, who do I trust my life to? I called Mike. He said he'd be willing to go. We talked about on the last episode that I took the 2 harnesses to go around the harness, and as I'm showing him how it works, how to hook it up in case I need any help, And then he's asking, what is this for? And I said, because there's actually been, we don't want to get too graphic, but there's been recoveries where they've been in the water for an amount of time where things come off. Yes. So body parts come apart. So this way, it's pulling from multiple points. It's tying around his whole torso, plus pulling at the sockets, which are the strongest point. So I'm showing him how it works. He's dragging me around the room. Then I told him we may have to bring him out backwards, because a lot of times their head gets in the way. You know, obviously they're not cooperative going through restrictions, and there's nasty type restrictions. So I have this harness that goes around the waist, through a loop, down, through another loop, around the knee, around this knee, and then out, and that sucks the legs together, plus it pulls from this and this, so all the way around the entire hip torso area, plus the knees, and keeps everything together.
Because you're pretty adamant about getting them out the way you found them, right? Not just beat them up, get them out however.
I remember a recovery decades ago where the family was screaming, I did not do this one, that my son was murdered because his face was all gone. Yeah. So I'm very adamant about bringing them out as intact as humanly possible. So
after this guy has been dead for like 19 days too, right? By the time they got there. And so the zero visibility was not just silt; it was also like
body part soup.
But
so
putting them in a bag is not your preferred method?
Oh no, because you've got restrictions to go through.
So that's just going to make it just to
that would be nearly impossible.
Really hard.
We get them out, and on this one, once we got them to the main passage, that's where I bagged them. But once I got through, and I showed him how the other harness worked, and he drugged me around the floor on that one, then I pulled the bag out, and he goes, "What's the bag for?" And I said, I put it on my head, and it's got a cinch string that pulls up. I said, this semi-protects his head, and we've had to where the head's come off, and that way you're just picking up a bag instead of the actual head that's coming apart. So once I showed him how everything worked, and I said, your job is just to have the line in one hand, me on the other, and if, because I have to have both hands on him. And if the cave changes directions, I need you to stop me, move me to the right location so I can back up, and tell me to go. So we got, when we got in there, they had already stripped him of his gear. So he's just in a wetsuit. Normally, the average person's gonna take 5 to 7, 8 pounds of lead to make them negatively
How do you
buoyant.
find them, by the way?
We usually run into them. I'm online and searching like this.
Yeah.
And you're searching for the cave, and so once you know it's clear to go here, then you search everywhere you can search, and I ran into them. So they had put 8 pounds of weight into his wetsuit, and assuming that would be plenty, he was a fairly skinny guy. So as I started to get him moving, the first is a down angle, and there was a shelf sticking out here, and he kept getting hung up on that shelf, and I just physically, I'm a pretty strong guy, and I physically could not get him down enough. So we had to go back out, and I had a volunteer team bring in an entire milk crate full of weights, and I had them make up a bunch. So there's a bunch of weights. And then I had to make up a whole bunch of weight belts in 12-pound increments, because that's all I can carry and still have buoyancy.
Yeah.
So I gave one to Mike, one to me, back into the Zero Viz. We find him. Now I've got to put these weight belts on him. Now he's positively buoyant against the ceiling. So I've got to try and thread this, and I can't see. This is complete zero visibility. So I'm trying not to put the weights so that they're down. I need them on his sides, so that we're not making his profile any bigger.
Yeah.
So the weight belts have to be put on in a specific way. So I get them on him, and we're going, and it's still just way too hard. So we got to go back
24
out.
24 pounds on him, on top of the A. So 32 pounds.
Yes. So
wow.
I've got him down to the next restriction. We're on a down angle like this, and it's just too much work. So we go back, and we get 2 more 12-pound weight belts. But I can't get them on him. There's not enough room without him being here or here to
Yeah.
get him on his sides. So he's got shorts on, pockets. So now I have to take the weights off the weight belt and put them in his pocket. But I'm on an angle, so where do I put the weights? So I find a rock off to my right that's sitting there like this. So I have to slide the weight off the weight belt, find that rock, set it on the rock, get the next weight. Now I have to find that one and stack it up without knocking that over. And now I've got them stacked up. Now I've got to find them again, find his pocket, get in there.
That's crazy.
Then, once I get that side done, now I get the other weight belt from Mike, and I have to do it again. It's like playing Jenga in the dark, in the water,
Zero biz.
with
Not an
weights.
angle.
So I get that done. Now he's got another 24 pounds, he's had 60 pounds of weight on him. And he's still positively blown. But by this time, I can't put any more weight on him. His shorts, I have so much weight in them, they're coming off. Luckily, I had the harness around him, so
Yeah.
they couldn't come completely off.
And that's normal for a body that's been in the water for a long time to float up like that?
I've talked to so many experts, and none of them said that this, because we haven't even got to the end yet.
Okay.
Wow.
So, because he ended
Oh,
up
wait,
having,
there's more. Wow.
yeah, he ended up with over 100 pounds of weight on him, and he's still buoyant. So now I can't get any more weight on him at this time. So what I'm doing is, it's about this tall. So I got my chest on the floor and my head on the ceiling for an anchor point, and then my knees on the floor and my ankles so I look like a W for multiple anchor points, and then I have to yank down
Wow.
and pull him towards me, and then back up a little bit, and then yank down and pull him towards me.
And Mike's just there.
Just
And then all of a sudden we got to change, and he stops me. And of course, when he stops me, I've got him in here. Now there's a body stuck to my face, and I got to wait for him to reposition me. So we go, and when we get out, this is a really big passage, and we're down here at the bottom. So I kind of wedge him off to the side to go get the bag. And as I start to leave him, he starts coming out, and he's
Oh, boy.
sailing for the ceiling, which is about 30 feet above us.
Wow.
And all I can envision is him exploding.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I zoom up and I get on top of him, and I've got his arms and his head right here, and I duck my head, and pow, I hit the ceiling to protect him.
Oh.
Now I'm stuck to the ceiling because he's pushing, so now I've got to get out from underneath him, go get a bag, come back with the bag. Now Mike's doing something over here, and I'm trying to get this guy in a bag by myself.
Yeah.
There was a guy, Danny, that we were working out of his shop, and when he's the one that took us in, he was on a Optima rebreather, and he couldn't go in there because it's too small. But he said, I'm going to show you where it is, and I'm going to wait for you to come out. And I'm like, shit, we could be in there 6, 7, 8 hours. And he goes, well, I'll be here. And when we came out, sure enough, there he was. So he's just lighting everything up, but not helping me put this guy in a bag.
Nobody wanted
And and of course, anyway, it was difficult, so I get him in the bag. I can't get him off the ceiling. So Mike comes up to help me get him off the ceiling. The two of us can't do it. Then Denny comes in. The three of us can't do it.
Wow.
So we go down and we get all the rest of the weight belts. Yeah, we took 6 weight belts. There was 6 handles on the body bag, 3 on each side. We put a 12-pound weight belt on all 6 of these. So that's another 72 pounds on top of the close to 60 he
It's
already
just
has
air
on.
inside of him that is not escaping. That's right.
Gas or something.
It's gas inside of his body that never escapes.
So now I'm thinking this thing's gonna plummet because I just put 1,
yeah.
no, 2, no, 3, no,
Put 'em
4,
all.
5, 6, and now we have to pull and swim. And we'd go down, and we'd go anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. And we got to go like 700 or 800 feet. And then we got to go down to get him through a restriction in the bag.
Man, that's going to be hard.
And so Denny's on top, kicking, pushing, and Mike and I are on the bottom, swimming upside down, pulling. We finally get him to the restriction, through the restriction, and then up into the cavern. Now the cavern was a little more porous ceiling, and we couldn't move him at all. It was just stuck there. And we're just fighting and fighting and fighting. And finally the Navy divers who were out at the open water saw our lights. They came in, and I think there was 4 of them plus the 3 of us, and 7 of us got him out.
Wow.
Then
Second guy.
I have to go back in the next day and get the second guy. And so I'm talking to Philip Lehman, who is head of the DRSS over there. And he said, "Did you see my reel?" And I said, "I didn't see anything." And he said, "Well, where the feet of the victim would have been is my reel." And so I have to go back to there, undo his reel, and now I'm exploring a cave I've never been in complete zero visibility. So I've got to hold the reel in one hand, and I'm trying to run it on this wall, and feel, and look for a body, and explore a cave. And I got maybe 20-ish feet forward, and then it just stopped.
There's a wall.
There's a wall. And I thought, I didn't feel him over here. So now I've got to find a placement, or a place to tie off. So everything's loose rock. I finally find a place, I get a nice secure tie off, we turn, and we're going this way. And I go, I don't know, 15, 20 feet, and all of a sudden I hit another wall. And I'm like, shit, I couldn't have missed it. And then I start feeling the wall, and then I feel there's an edge. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going down. So there's just a space about this wide to go down. So I start going, no, at first it was about this wide. So I go off the edge and I want to find the wall. So I'm finding the wall, and it's muggy and slimy. There's no flow in this cave. And I'm feeling down this slimy wall, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, that rock's really slimy. And then I went, oh shit, that rock has hair. So I yelled to Mike, I found him. And before that, I have a mask light on, but it's just showing white, brown, nothing. And all of a sudden it changed to red right before I found him. So I thought, okay, I'm in another blood layer. So he's got to be close, and that's when I found him.
Wow.
So talking with Mike,
Yeah.
talking to Mike about the next day's dive that night,
I don't want that specialty. Blood layer specialty. Let's not.
I told him,
When he said it,
I told him they cut all the gear off. I want to try something different. I'm going to cut the tank away, but I'm going to leave his BC on him because there's most likely weights in the BC.
Yeah.
And there's pockets that I can put more weights in. So I've got to feel around, and then I'm trying to work in zero space and zero viz, and I cut the tank off. Now I can't see. And when I cut the tank off, I didn't even think about it being positively buoyant because I'd already taken the reg set off, and it came right up and hit me right in the face. Just about took my DSV out of my mouth. So I throw it off to the side, and I'm getting him up, and he comes up the first couple inches okay, the next, and then he's just stopped. Oh, and when I found him, I had to back up and find someplace to tie the reel off to. So I got to back up like 8 feet before I could find someplace to tie the reel off to. So now, once I get it secured, now I'm going with no line to try and re-find this body without a line in zero visibility. And all of a sudden I'm going and going and going, and it's like farther than I thought, and I'm going down, and all of a sudden I find him, and then I'm thinking, shit, I don't even know where that line is. And luckily with the rebreathers we can talk.
Yeah.
And I said, Mike. He's like, yeah. I go, have you got the line? I have the line. Okay, so I go to work. And as I'm getting him up, and he's not going anymore, I'm like, okay, he's stuck somewhere. So I'm thinking maybe the BC's hung up, something's catching on something. So I'm feeling down around, and there's not much room to work and feel. And apparently this thing came up like this, because he had a stage bottle on. And I'm thinking, this cave is really small for side mount divers. How did he get in with a stage and a back mount? This guy must have been amazing.
He's a super cave diver.
Because there was people that couldn't even get in there. So anyway, so now I got to cut this stage away. So I reach down, I find the bolt snap, and it's so tight I can't get it unclipped.
Wow.
He's wedged. So I got to get my Z-knife out and I cut the top of his stage
Whatever's holding the
strap,
bolts down.
and it falls down. I got to reach down and I'm trying to find the bottom clip, and all of a sudden I come into a whole rat's nest of line. And now I know what happened to the several hundred feet of line that was no longer in the cave. So I'm trying to get that out of there, and it's all hung up. And I can't see to do any of this. I've just got to go by feel. And all of a sudden I'm pulling and pulling and pulling, and I've got most of it away, but this one piece is tough. So I get my Z-knife out, and I'm about ready to cut this, and then I'm thinking, I don't know where our line is. So I'm like, and I cut it, and I'm waiting for Mike to scream, but he doesn't. So I go, Mike, have you got the line? And he squeezes my leg again. I have the line. I'm like, okay, good. But when I cut that bottom bolt snap, you heard that tank drop. King, getting, ding. So it was full. So he died with a full
That's weird.
aluminum, probably because he was so wedged in he couldn't get to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I get him out up to where the first victim was, and then we start doing the same exact thing. And at one point, I swear this was like a miracle. We're coming down that slopey area, and I've had to do the same thing, wedge weight belts in, we've done all the same thing. By this time, I am so exhausted, I can barely breathe. And we're working him down, and I'm pulling and yanking, and Mike's positioning me. Mike did an awesome job. And at one point, I can't breathe. I'm CO2ing myself out from over-breathing the loop. And I just stopped. And I can't see my PO2. I had to, every 5 or 7 minutes, I'm like banging my computer.
And did you feel out of it? Were you starting to get dizzy?
I was getting
blacking out?
dizzy and heavy breathing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I just stopped.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because there's a lot of people that will say, like, well, you can always see your computer.
I've heard a million people say, well, I wasn't a million. I've heard hundreds of people say, you can always see a HUD. No, you can't. If you are on the assumption that you can always see a HUD, come dive with me.
Yeah.
I'll
Heads-up
take you.
display, yeah.
I will scare you to death.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I will scare you to death.
So-
well, I mean, how many people are watching? Because most of the people that watch our channel are not divers,
Oh, okay.
even divers, right?
so they're probably scared to death now.
I can't imagine
They're
the
petrified.
environment
So-
that he's talking about.
So I just stopped. Well, Mike doesn't know what's going on. He
Yeah.
just feels that I'm not moving, and I'm like dead weight. And all of a sudden he's squeezing. Are you okay? And I don't even want to talk. I just said, all stop. And he repeats, all stop. And I'm just sitting there gathering up my thoughts, trying to get my breathing under control,
Yeah.
trying to just nice shallow breathing. I purged the loop a couple times, and pretty soon 5 minutes has gone by. Are you okay? And I go, all stop. So he's just back there going, okay, I'm not even going to ask him again. And I asked him later, could you see your PO2? Because somebody said, you can't be on a rebreather and not see your PO2.
Yeah.
But I was so in tune with what my machine's doing that once every 5 or 6 minutes was all I needed, and it was perfect every single time. But anyway, he's back there, and in service. And he said when he'd pop his head up by the, along the ceiling, sometimes he could see 2 or 3 or 4 inches because the sediment hadn't got, or the blood hadn't got up that high.
All right, so we're back at Cave Adventures. We had a really bad storm and we lost power last time, and we couldn't hear the ending of that story. Funny thing is, as soon as we lost power and it went dark, you freaked out, which was weird.
I'm afraid of the dark, so we weren't. You said you weren't going to tell them.
All right, I'll cut this off. No, so where we left it was, you were just done talking about how, you know, you were pulling this guy, and there was a point where you saw, like, I guess, I don't know if it was your CO2 level was too high or whatever, but you just stopped. And Mike was asking if you were okay, and you were just telling him, like, all stop. That's basically where we ended.
Okay, so we got the part in where it was all stop, and yeah. Essentially, I had just been working so hard that I was just over breathing the unit, and I just needed to get my CO2 level. So I just completely stopped and just settled my breathing down. And while this was going on, like we had said, you know, Mike was squeezing my leg saying, "Are you okay?" Because I wasn't moving.
And this was zero vis, right?
Zero
can't
vis.
see it.
Zero vis.
Yeah.
And I have a mask light here, and I had my paralens here. And with the mask light on low, you could just see a white, it looked like fog, or brown, or when we were in a blood layer, it was red.
Right.
So, zero. In fact, when I'd go to check my PPO2, I would have to bang it on my mask and move it around to try and get enough clear water that I could see that 1/8 inch and to check it. So, I was just sitting there trying to get my breathing under control. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, which seems like a long time when you're not doing anything, and Mike's back there worried about me, so he squeezes my leg again. He said, "Are you okay?" And I just said, again, all stop. So he's just, and he noticed when, I mean, we're talking that tall, when his face was up against the ceiling, he said he could see 1 inch or 2. And he said he'd kind of look around, and then he said he'd look back down, and he said all of a sudden there was a cylindrical, crystal clear visibility, and he could see the bottom, and he saw something shining, and he thought it was looked like gold.
Wow.
And he said he kind of shook his head and looked again, and he picked up, and it was a gold wedding ring from the first victim.
Wow.
And then as soon as he picked it up and looked at it, it was zero visibility again. And when he told me this later, I'm like, yeah, no, it didn't. That didn't happen because there was no
You're
visibility.
imagining things, yeah.
There was no visibility to make it clear, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so
How narc with you? Yeah.
so later on that day, when the son of the first victim was there, Mike made sure that we got the ring back to him.
Wow.
So, and when I got to the dock, the general of the military there had asked me to film it. And he said, "Did you get anything?" And I said, "Well, I said, I don't know what turned out, but and my camera was gone." So at one point, when my head got wedged between the cave ceiling and the victim's head, it broke my mask mount.
Yeah, the stand or whatever.
And
I'm glad he didn't break the mask strap
Yeah.
on top of it, because
Yeah. Well, I did have a backup mask in my pocket, but yeah, one of the divers that's the head of the DRSS over there, Philip Lehman, was going to go back in, and he said, "I'll find your
try
camera."
to find the camera, yeah.
And he went back about a month later because all the gear that I'd cut off of him, he was supposed to bring out. And he said he went back in, and all that blood layer that was in there that was red had just turned black. And he said it was complete black, zero vis. And so he might have retrieved one piece of gear, but he said, "I'll go back in a few months when it clears up." And I think he went back like 4 months later, and then almost 10 months later, and he said it's still
Black.
zero vis back there.
Oh.
So my camera's still there. Hopefully one day.
Somebody will find it, yeah?
Well, I was planning to go back to the DR, and then of course this whole pandemic thing happened, so that all the plans got put on hold. But when I go back, I am gonna swing by El Dudu and see if I can go in there, and even if it's still black, I mean, it's been 3 years now.
Wow.
I'll just do the entire dive by feel. And
Try to spot something that kind of feels like a
yeah, I'll know the difference between a camera and a rock.
parallels.
So we'll see what happens. That might be an interesting dive just in itself, and maybe I can get some of their gear out of there at the same time.
Wow, that was tough. So you guys come out, and then what happens? Just throw your stuff on a bag and fly out, or I mean, I assume you have to decontaminate everything because it's blood layer to black water. Both sound horrible.
We had some great pictures. I'll try and get some of them to you. Of I'm like this, and they pressure wash us, and then they had this big 55-gallon drum of some kind of disinfectant, and what looked to be a small push broom, and they just dunk it in, and so we'd be like this, and they'd scrub it. They'd pressure wash us first, and then scrub us down, front and back. And then we'd get pressure washed again, then they'd scrub us again, then we'd get pressure washed again, and then we could take our gear off.
Wow.
And from all the trying to shove weight belts around this guy stuck to the ceiling, I kept having to get my arm jammed between the cave ceiling and him. And it ended up, after the first dive, it tore my wrist seal. So Mike did kind of a last minute field repair on a semi-wet and believe it or not, it held all but the last I think it held the whole dive, and when I went to take my chute off, that whole wrist seal popped off.
Got destroyed, yeah.
But that dry chute stunk so bad that I just threw it in the garbage can and left it in the Dominican. So
Wow, that was crazy. That's awesome, and I think that's a great ending to the story. I wanted to come back and record the ending because, man, that whole thing about finding the ring, I still can't believe it. That's unbelievable.
I mean, if Mike said it happened, I'm sure he thought it happened. And what he saw, I don't know what he saw, but he ended up with the ring, so you can't argue with that. But I was there the whole time, and there was I don't know where he got any visibility, but unless it was some kind of divine intervention. But
so is that cave still open today to divers?
It is. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I wonder if it's black or if visibility finally cleared
Well,
up.
the whole cave was pristine visibility. That one tunnel, there is zero flow in there. So it eventually has to, whatever's in there has to eventually settle out.
Yeah.
But I don't know how long it's going to take, or it may be clear by now. Who knows?
Wow.
But I would like to get my camera back just to see. I'll bet it is still watertight, and I'll bet that card's still good. So
That would be awesome.
Be nice to have the video. See what
For sure.
Because remember, the camera always sees more than we do.
Oh yeah.
That video I did says this is high flow or something like that. That cave, I had to go hand over hand with the screwdrivers. I could see nothing. It was just sand pelting me in the face.
Yeah.
And it appeared, even though it was clear water, it appeared complete zero. But the camera, you could actually see things every once in a while.
Yeah.
So the camera picks up more than you do. So maybe there's something on it. It's hard to say.
Yikes. That video must be pretty gnarly though. If you ever find it.
Yeah.
Whoever finds that.
Well, they sent me a video that they filmed before I got there when there was somewhat better viz. And when they sent the first video, I watched it. And then right before I came, on their last dive, they shot another video. And Stacy had seen the first video. And she was like, But when the second video came, it came in the middle of the night. So I was watching it at like 5:30 in the morning. And she started to walk in, and I hit escape. So the screen would go, and she was like, let me see it. And I said, you don't want to see this.
Probably don't.
And she said, I already saw that. And I said, no, this is another one. And I said, do not watch this. And she said to this day she still hasn't, because she's come on almost all the body recoveries and rescues that I've done over the many, many years. In fact, she's helped out she's tremendous for surface support. She handled the whole thing over at the Ben's Vortex search. Yeah. There was the first time I got a rebreather diver out of a cave here, Blue Springs. The sheriff's department had never seen a rebreather, so they didn't know how to get it off of him. She ended up jumping in the water with her clothes still on.
Wow.
To to take this stuff apart. So she's been on a lot of them. She's really good at keeping a cool, calm head. She just gets the job done. And something about this one, she was petrified for me. She had me redo my well, so that tells you one thing. But
before you leave,
she was really worried, and I had a lot of people call and say you don't need to do this. And so I don't know what it was about this one, because I've done this, I've done so many that when the phone rings, I go, and whether it's a rescue or a recovery, and even though I've never been there before, and even when I can't see, you just charge full steam ahead. But something about this one seemed to have a lot of people on edge. So I'm glad it turned out the way it did.
For sure.
And they were going to close the cave, leave the bodies in there, and I knew those families needed closure. And
yeah.
And the son, he thanked me that day, but there was so much going on. And then he called like a week later, and we had a really nice long conversation. And you could tell he was a really well brought up, well mannered kid that really missed his dad. So I'm glad that family got closure.
Yeah, that's for sure. Awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you again for telling a story. And people are always making comments like, we want more Edd stories. We want more Edd stories. So I just have to keep coming and diving with you guys and recording more.
I got a million of them. So we'll over that Cuban cigar tonight. We'll talk about what we're gonna do next.
Let's do it. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.